notice that came out, I guess possibly that's what many of you saw, a month ago or so, and you mark calendars, and it's at 4 o'clock. We had the last session about 2 weeks ago, and people are saying, boy, this is really crowded me, you know, I don't get off work in time and so forth. So we put another notice out saying 4:30, but I got a bug crawling on me. But anyway, my apologies for any confusion, and sorry to keep you waiting. So let's get going. Now, some people will come in, and we'll catch up when they do. My job is the easiest part here tonight. We're just going to talk a little bit, then questions and answers, comments. That's why we're doing this. It's your opinions that matter most here. I'm going to introduce Dan Olson, our principal planner, but before I do, I just want to say something about comprehensive land use planning. So you've got, some of you have printed off what you might have seen online. And I just, everybody dance. Sorry. Good, thank you. It's only about 72 pages, about average for a comprehensive plan. So what is a comprehensive land use plan? It is it's an impression that you, together with ultimately the city council and staff, believe should represent the land uses, and there are a variety of them, as you know, industrial, commercial, residential, so forth, the land uses that ought to be embraced in our community, and in the 1.5 mile area that's just beyond our community, which by state law is an area that we can plan our future into. And in addition to that, there are some details as you've gone through this, as you've noticed, that distinguish between one use and another. But if you're looking for a lot of detail about zoning, for instance, you won't find that in here. Has anybody noticed that that's not, you don't see maps that show, oh, that's zoned R1, R2, or R3. That's in other documents, and of course we're government, so we have lots of documents. This is called a Unified Development Ordinance. So if this is the aerial view, this is the phone book, okay? And there are a lot of phone books. There are financial plans, there are sustainability plans, there are operational plans, and then there are zoning documents and so forth. All of this is connected to the comprehensive plan in the sense that if you had no knowledge of DeKalb and you wanted to know more, it's a little bit like picking up that cheap road map at the gas station. Do they still have them at gas stations? I don't know if they do. So you get one of those, and you're just trying to find where Route 64 goes, and you see it goes to such and such a town, but it doesn't tell you that there's some really nice Italian restaurants there. It doesn't tell you that there's necessarily even a university if it's City of DeKalb. You just realize there's going to be other things you'll have to look at. So you get the idea. This doesn't tell you everything, but it tells you some important information that, interestingly, you don't find in other documents. So if you're looking for how to color your world in a very general way, particularly as we get out toward the cornfields, you know, how do we transition to that as an example? Every community has to wrestle with that. In our county, there is actually a written agreement, not an unwritten agreement, with all of the municipalities and the county board that in that 1.5 mile area that is ours under state statute to plan in and to work out our future in, that we will take very careful note of the fact that this is some of the best farmland in the world. And if we're going to grow, we should grow not in leapfrog fashion, hopping and skipping, going out 5 miles and saying that ought to be DeKalb, but in kind of concentrically or contiguously as we go along our way. And that's how we have been, we've been planning our future for about 20 years since that deal was struck. And it's been about 20 years now, I think. Okay, so much for the overture. The main event is here. Dan's going to walk you through the key components and the chapters, and then open it up to you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, Bill. We do have copies, as you probably saw when you came in, of the part of the comp plan. We don't have the full set, but we have the goals and summary, or the goals and objectives, summary of the map changes, and also the urban design guidelines. There's copies in the back for you. Also my card. Again, there's the full plan is on our website, cityofdekalb.com, on the front page. There's a comment sheet if you want to write some comments, or you can email me. My card's in the back. We'll accept those, certainly. And as Bill mentioned, we had an open house on June 30th. So kind of the process, once we conclude tonight, we're getting comments in, and then we'll have an official public hearing in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. We're going to schedule that for August 15th here in this room at 6 p.m. And the Planning and Zoning Commission has been working with staff on this draft. For the last few months, we had 4 meetings working on the draft. And so the commission is responsible for the recommendation onto the City Council of the comprehensive plan. The last plan we did was in 2005, so it's been 17 years since we've done this. So we've adopted a few corridor plans since that time. But as Bill mentioned, the comprehensive plan is kind of a very general land use guidance for the next 5 to 10 years. The chapters in the comp plan, or typical comp plan, have a few components. The main ones, the first is the introduction or gathering of data, analysis of the information, demographics, building permits. We look at the background information, history of development. Then usually have a formation of the goals and objectives is certainly a key component of any comprehensive plan. What the goals are, and then how you're going to accomplish those goals. And the final is the comprehensive plan map, which you see here, which gives us a future direction on the development of the community and within the 1.5 miles of our city limits. As I mentioned, the comp plan, the first one, or the last one, was a full comp plan, was in 2005. The city certainly hasn't been doing nothing since then. We've adopted several corridor plans, downtown plans. Most recently, you probably heard of the Annie Glen North plan in 2018. So this plan is not canceling these out or anything. Certainly it's may change something on some of the older plans here, but like the AGM plan stays intact. It doesn't go away. And this plan incorporates many of those goals and recommendations and land uses that were shown on that plan. So at the beginning, we just have several graphs. We look at the background information, the first two, and I just pulled a few slides to show you population-wise, see the population change over the decades. And only since 1900, twice have we lost population. We did lose population the last 10 years. So 2020 census, we did lose about 8.1% of the population. So there's some goals in here to try and get the population increasing. That's been a statewide issue in Illinois for population loss. Also, we took a look at like race. DeKalb, of course, a very diverse community. About 66% identify as white, 13% black or African American, 13% Hispanic or Latino, and 5% Asian. And this is pretty comparable to what the state of Illinois percentage is. So we're very reflective of the state in terms of demographics. This slide just shows the employment, largest employers in the community from 2010 and 2020, and the rank. Of course, NIU the largest, but we have a variety of uses here. Biggest gains, Target, the school district, American Marketing Publishing, and Ferrera certainly, and we'll have more next year with Amazon and other uses. But there's quite a diversity here with education and healthcare, distribution, warehouse, and marketing and publishing. So we do have a diverse workforce. The EAV has grown quite a bit in the last year. The documents we show in the plan, particularly with the new FRARE and the partial assessment of the Facebook site, that grew by 11.7 million. So that's quite a substantial increase, and we forecast that to also increase quite a bit in the future as other development comes along I-88. This slide just shows some of the permit activity, industrial, commercial, and residential, and the evaluation of the permits. You can see industrial and commercial has grown quite a bit. The residential did grow, but it's other years have been higher. So this shows the number of permits between single-family detached and multifamily. Still in single-family, we're 10 or under in the last few years, projecting probably about the same this year, but we've seen an increase in multifamily, and that's with some of the developments of like Plaza DeKalb, Isaac Suites, Cornerstone, Agora Tower coming under construction, so we see that also continuing. This next slide is interesting. I kind of thought it shows a housing capacity, or how many lots are left out in the current city limits in approved developments. It lists the subdivision here and the number of single-family and attached units that were platted and how many were built. Now, Iron Gate was approved on a preliminary basis, annex and zone and preliminary, but there's about 1,300 vacant lots in the city limits for single-family homes. So that's quite a capacity right there. So that really affected our future land use map in terms of shrinking in the amount of single-family. And I'll go over the 2005 plan in a bit. So looking at the background information, what were the planning issues that we wanted to look at? What land should be developed within the 1.5 mile perimeter of the city? As Bill said, we do have jurisdiction, some planning influence within 1.5 miles of the city limits in terms of our subdivision regulations, and any rezoning requests through the county, we'll be notified, and we have a chance to comment on that or object to it. What policies should we develop to shape the future area within 1.5 miles, which is ag zone land? With the recent strong increase in industrial development along I-88 and Peace Road, how can we enhance that? How can we create or get the jobs or people trained to fill those positions? Also, residential-wise, how can we continue the residential to support new workers coming into the community, provide affordable housing, different types of housing? Looking at the tax base with the retail downturn in the brick and mortar development and online purchasing, how do we address that? And how do we just enhance the quality of life? So the goals and objectives kind of covered several areas. I've just listed the goal, and I'll kind of highlight a few objectives. Community appearance, goal is to reinvigorate the college town identity while promoting expansion of the tax base and community-wide orientated service and jobs. Objectives, there are several. I'll highlight a few. That's continued support of the TIF district downtown, TIF number 3. Currently right now, of course, Lincoln Highway is being reconfigured. So its sidewalks are wider, more pedestrian friendly, and will slow down the traffic through downtown. Also look to investigate different gateways into the city to make sure they're consistent and compatible and show the true edge of the city and where to go. And we also adopted some urban design guidelines, or proposing to, at the end of the plan. And those cover residential, industrial, and commercial also, so we're supporting that. Industrial development, retain the quality industrial firms and continue to diversify the community's industrial base. We want to be business friendly, so we want to continue the networking with our partners, the DC, EDC, the state, IDOT, ComEd, et cetera. Aggressively promote the sites on the city's southeast side of the town. Along Gerla Road, Peace Road, we want to keep the momentum going. Facilitate development with public improvements in that area, roadway improvements, water and sewer, working with land developers and other agencies to make that happen. Also, we have urban design guidelines for the industrial areas. We want to cooperate with the NIU, Kish College, to help train the employees that come to the community and train the ones that are currently in. Looking at the commercial development, we want to promote community-oriented commercial retail and service outlets, cluster the commercial areas along the areas we designate on the plan, Sycamore Road, Annie Glen North. For example, the Hillcrest and Blackhawk property is critical. Work at downtown, of course. Continue the improvement in downtown in terms of the image, identity, and economic base. And promote more retail development on Sycamore Road if we can in terms of different types of land uses going in. Of course, there's been a downturn in retail, brick and mortar throughout the country, so we've actually have allowed other non-retail uses in those areas like climate-controlled self-storage, fitness center, apartments, even in a office building. So some of those areas have large parking lots. Hopefully, maybe someday we can have some outlots available there to have other types of uses. Track commercial development in our other corridors like South 4th Street or East Lincoln Highway. Also review our parking regulations to make sure we're not demanding more parking than what actually is needed by that particular use. So if we can reduce the amount of payment, if it's not necessary, and more open space, we certainly want to encourage that. Residential, preserve the neighborhood, a variety of neighborhoods, review density and new multifamily high-density zoning, consider higher densities above 12 units per acre where it's currently in the UDO if it's a planned development, if it promotes other goals within the plan and encourages open space and meets a need in the community. Link residential areas with pedestrian bicycle pathway systems. And again, align a more comprehensive plan with the urban design guidelines, which I'll briefly go over at the end here. Promote affordability in new subdivisions. Look at homes, smaller homes, look at lots under 6,000 square feet. So their more affordable housing can come into the community. So that's promoted in the plan. Downtown enhancement, enhance the vitality of downtown in terms of aesthetics, commercial and pedestrian activity, supporting the TIF and the TIF-related AIP program, that's the Architectural Improvement Program. Support upper floor residential development with first floor, ground floor commercial. The additional residential downtown will promote more pedestrian activity in the downtown area. Coordinate the, look at the current signage that's in downtown that directs people to cultural locations, public parking. Work on those to make sure they are directing people to the correct area in a unified way. And also using of TIF number 3, of course, in the downtown to help redevelop certain areas, particularly 3rd Street and Locust area. The former McCabe's is brought up, building there. And complete the Lincoln Highway reconfiguration project. Economic development, maintain and support our image. We have a business-friendly image now. We want to maintain that going forward. Again, promote our business retention through EDC, EDC, the Chamber of Commerce, and actively market our industrial sites to expand the tax base. Community facilities, this is the other, working with other taxing districts, setting goals on tax rates to make sure that the community is, so we don't discourage further development. We want to make sure the tax rates are looked at so we can enhance future development, industrial and commercial and residential. And work again with the partners, the sanitary district, school district, park district to make sure we're coordinating our plans and looking long range and working together. We also have natural features. That's creating the ag area within the 1.5 miles. Also establishing, promoting greenways, open space areas per our subdivision regulations, and review future developments, make sure they're meeting our open space requirements, and working with the park district and other agencies on that. Finally, transportation, of course, and work with the DSATs, that's a regional planning council for transportation, allocating transportation funds. The most recent activity on that is the siting of a new mass transit facility in DeKalb. So that's a summary of the goals and objectives. So from that, we've developed a future 2022 land use plan. This is a chart showing the area of each land use in 2005 and 2022, some of the changes. A large reduction in new single-family areas. I'll go to the 2005 plan. This was a 2005 plan, and it showed a large, all this yellow is single-family residential, and this is a current rough boundary lines you can kind of see. But it had single-family development all the way in the 1.5 mile area, and little commercial nodes too, shown in red. Of course, in 2005, housing was going pretty strong. I think the plan forecasted the city would probably be around 60,000, 70,000 people. Obviously, that hasn't happened. So with a large capacity of already lots platted in the city, we scaled this amount of single-family way back that was projected in the 1.5 mile just to certain areas that were already contiguous to the city, because we already have a lot of lots platted in the city, and some areas that are vacant that are somewhat surrounded by the city that could certainly handle residential development. So with this plan, there's also quite an increase in industrial on the southeast side of the city, shown in the purple here. And industrial category is all encompassing data centers, distribution, warehouse, more heavy industrial. It covers quite a category of uses there. So that was increased and pushed to we have boundary agreements with the town of Cortland and city of Sycamore, so the industrial was pushed to those areas where we touch up with those boundary agreements with the other communities. And of course, the increase in the ag within the 1.5 mile was a large increase too. So the primary features, and they're on the table back there, changes in the land use plan. I mentioned the additional industrial areas, the reduction of the single family in the 1.5 mile. And I broke down the slides just to show a little more close-up of certain quadrants. This is the northwest quadrant of the city. The city current limits are in the black hash line. So you can see this mostly ag within the 1.5 mile, keeping that. And a few areas that are contiguous to the current city limits or somewhat surrounded by the city would be future residential development, single-family development. So we just did a few areas. This is the more the southwest side of the city. So this some potential areas for future growth shown in yellow here. Contiguous, we don't want anything leapfrogging out in the county, in the city for that. And that's consistent with DeKalb County's plan too of developments being contiguous to municipalities, not leapfrogging subdivisions out in the middle of farmland. So those were the main changes. We also had some mixed-use designations in certain areas to kind of go off the trend, which we've seen with Cornerstone, Isaac Suites, Plaza DeKalb, future Agora Tower, and we called for some mixed-use areas that are reflective in the AGN plan, like at Hillcrest and Blackhawk, and also down at, for example, Village Commons and Lucinda, which would be a good area for mixed-use commercial at the lower level and apartments above. So we spent a lot of time actually when the plan going almost parcel by parcel, all the development since 2005, neighborhood by neighborhood, making sure the existing land uses were correct on the plan. So a lot of time was spent on that, and it's pretty accurate. We lose that, Jeff? I'll come back up. Thanks. So the plan really is a big part of this comprehensive plan. We also included urban design guidelines in the plan, and I have some slides on those. There's a copy of them in the back table if you want to take with you. But they're going to design or guide the design of the city in the future in terms of buildings. We do have ability to review new buildings when they come in if it's a planned development. or special use, and we have done that with other projects. But these guidelines will give direction to the developer of what we're looking for, how to design the building to be more pedestrian friendly, not break up the building a little bit, fit into the neighborhood. And these cover residential, commercial, and industrial development, as well as open space, even signage and parking lots. So I won't go through those. They're in the back, but there's some images with it that just give an idea of what we're kind of looking for in terms of perhaps housing, more garages on the side or back behind if possible. Give the good street view, commercial, industrial, and even, as I mentioned, the open space areas, parking lots, and signage. So those guidelines will, so when the project comes in, we'll provide those to the developer and ask them to take a look at these and try to comply with them, and that will help evaluate their project if they do meet many of those guidelines. We'll do probably some amendments to the UDO also to help encourage those to be used, but a lot of it will be more of a kind of sharing of our information with the developer and making sure they use those guidelines when they present a project to the city to make sure it meets our requirements. That's the last chapter in the plan. The next step is, in terms of this process, there'll be an official public hearing in front of a Planning and Zoning Commission. We're going to schedule that for August 15th, Monday at 6 o'clock in this room. The commission has a task of making a recommendation on the comp plan to the city council. So once the commission makes a recommendation, that will go into the council level and hopefully a decision by the end of August or early September by the city council. So with that, we can open up to questions for Bill and myself. Scott's got the mic, and we'll go to 6 o'clock or whenever you like. So any questions, and then we'll start with, all right, go ahead.
There are several references to DeKalb's identity as a college town. What does that mean beyond the fact that the university is physically located here?
Well, I think, and Bill can chime in too, but I think the college town is a combination of many things beyond the college itself and the students that come along with it to make sure the city is accommodating. There's been talk a lot of years about making sure there's a good link between the college, the university, and downtown. So we don't make any future development, encourage that certainly, and encourage students and university community to shop downtown. So it's it can be many different things, but that's kind of the main item, I think, is just trying to make sure the college continues to be supportive of the city and its uses, and try to physically link the two together. That's always been talked about quite a bit, and the plan does encourage that linkage too. And also development around the university too, in terms of the AGN neighborhood. That plan from 2018 near the university obviously focused a lot of public input on that, a lot of public input, particularly from the university to make sure that they're developed together and cohabitate with each other. So.
I'll just add.
Jeff's watching anybody speaks. He wants you in the screen, yeah.
Okay. So that's an excellent question. We've been asking that question for a generation, right? Or maybe more. Can everybody hear? Is that okay? In fact, maybe the WAG has been for a long time. We're a town with a university, not a university town. I'm saying university because there is a difference. And there's some truth to that. There's no doubt about it. And how does it happen that other places in our state even have a feel when you're visiting that they're more of a, I'll say, college town? What does that mean? Well, it means probably that you see more students working in locations in commercial areas of the town, and you run into them in restaurants, and not just driving trucks to deliver pizza and so forth, they're working. And lo and behold, oftentimes have some student-managed, even student-owned businesses in the downtown area. There are other things too, that businesses that come here are encouraged to find ways to connect with the university and vice versa. You know, Meta's been very powerful in that respect, in dealing particularly with, I mean, STEM, the acronym for science-centered types of occupations and initiatives, have been very agreeable to work with different colleges and departments at NIU and also at Kishwaukee College, so that's a good thing. But that's one very large corporation, has some resources to devote to that and people. So how do we do that? That's still an open question, but that's something we should work on with any companies that have some resources to do something more than just, you know, make ends meet. The regular intercourse of people who maybe work at NIU, and are they living in DeKalb? Are they shopping in DeKalb? Are we a commuter town, not just in terms of people coming here and working in a business going somewhere else, but are people who are working at the university commuting too? And then that tends to set up some gaps in connection. So how do you build the connectivity? So one thing we can do is also show we have pride in each other. It's a two-way street. The reconfiguration that's going on downtown right now will end up with more signs of NIU in the downtown. They're symbolic. They're going to be more banners, more paintings on building walls, some other surprises that will probably happen before the snow flies. And I trust, and I think the leadership of the city government and the university has never been closer in my years, 50-plus years here in this town. And I think there are ways now that are taking place and should be a lot more obvious in the next year and on, of how the university is welcoming people from who normally they're not taking classes, they're not working at NIU, but and maybe don't have regular intercourse with the programs and all the wonderful things that happen at the university on a daily basis, that we're more welcome and we're more involved in that. And also in the planning. So planning is a big piece of this, right? Land use planning. So we've had, you know, NIU's a stakeholder, big stakeholder, biggest employer. So we've been having dialogue about the plan. And Northern does planning also for the approach that it has for land use within that state property that is NIU. So we're more than I think ever before and welcome into that just in recent years. So it's a big discussion, but in a topic that opens itself to a lot of thought. And thank you for bringing it up. But I think we should all be thinking about that.
All land use plans should, I think, include a conservation component, and I think yours does on Chapter 3 here, natural features. And that's why I came tonight, because I wanted to speak about one of those natural features, and I've got 3 paragraphs typed here, if you bear with me. All right,
Yes.
I'll read. This is fine. Okay, my name is Michael Kirk. I'm a horticulturist, a master gardener, and a former employee of the Nature Conservancy involved in restoration of natural areas. I am here as an advocate for the approximate 2-acre woods on the north border of the Elwood House Museum. I want to inform citizens of DeKalb of this ecological treasure in our midst and that it is severely threatened. I have been told by Matt Emkin, Superintendent of Parks and Development for the DeKalb Park District, that the Park District does not have an ecologist on their staff, so there has been no management undertaking regarding these woods. I want to suggest that a third party be hired to begin restoration work as soon as possible. These woods are home to half a dozen 100-year-old or more trees, a number of native shrubs, and dozens of native woodland herbs. It is home to mammals, birds, and thousands of invertebrate species. Just a 2-acre woods until a month ago had never been plowed or paved. During the past 20 years, I have seen a number of rare plants extirpated on the site. I have watched trees dying and deadfall cover the ground where woodland wildflowers should be growing. I have watched invasive species increase and further degrade this site. I have witnessed illegal dumping. I have seen daffodils planted where once native plants thrived. So I'm here to raise awareness and seek protection for these little woods and its inhabitants in any plan going forward. I want to suggest a woodland restoration project be begun to remedy this neglect and damage, and there are a number of companies in the area to do that job. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Could you leave those comments written for us? Could you leave those comments for us? Can you leave the comments with us that you made written?
Yes, I sure did.
Okay, thank you.
And
Thanks.
that, sir, that's the Park District land to the north of Elwood House and to the west maybe of
Thanks.
the church,
Cemetery kind of church. But this is the northern
yeah,
edge of the property at Elwood House.
right.
About 2 acres.
And you've talked to the park board about this?
I have talked to who?
The park board?
I talked to Matt Enkin, and I
Okay.
have talked to the director at the Elwood House.
Okay. I think your next step, because it's park property, is to, I believe, maybe some of it belongs to the church, but I'd say park property, go to the, so the superintendent of the parks, who would be Matt's boss and the other, is a person you might want to talk to, and maybe you could get on the agenda rather than just being heard from the floor like this with the park board, and they meet on a regular basis, and you can get on there. I think that's important to do.
Well, thank you. I will.
I'd like to piggyback on the last comments. Oh, thank you. My name is Ron Chris, and I'd like to encourage the planners to look for places in the comprehensive plan where you can encourage this use of native plants. What's a native plant? Well, it's typically one that, yeah, it is corn, yeah. We'll talk about corn. It's one that was typically here before Europeans settled. And why native plants? Why have them? Let me give just a couple of reasons. Once established, native plants typically have low maintenance because they've evolved over here for thousands of years. They typically save water because they have deep roots, and those deep roots help control erosion and help mediate the variable rainfall that we have here in DeKalb. You don't need fertilizers, you don't need pesticides with native plants. My yard is completely free of those. They attract pollinators, like butterflies and bees. And as the farming community well knows, we need those pollinators for your business. If you don't have pollinators, you don't have corn, you don't have soybeans. And finally, just another example, those native plants also serve as shelter and food for the native insects that we have around here. And it's particularly important for some of those insects and those pollinators who are specialists, whose diet has to be a particular diet. Best example, monarch butterflies. What do they need? Milkweed. If you don't have milkweed for the monarch butterfly caterpillar, you don't have monarch butterflies. As some of you may know, my yard is probably 95% native plants. But I'm not here to advocate that you do that or that every business do that. There's a wonderful book out called Nature's Best Hope. It's by Doug Tallamy. Doug's a entomologist at the University of Delaware. And he's been really a leading advocate in the use of native plants for many years. And that recent book talks about how we might establish what he calls corridors of native plants. He calls them homegrown national parks, where people unite together to put a small portion of their land, public or private, in native plants. Maybe as little as 10% of their land. That would create millions of acres of native plants throughout the United States. What can we do? Doug offers a number of suggestions. One, shrink your yard. Get rid of at least part of that turf grass that you mow so frequently. Would you believe, at 84, I have an old push mower because I have so little turf to mow. Two, you should plant those specialist plants like the milkweed needed by monarch butterflies. Three, network with your neighbors. Last year, I offered my neighbors milkweed and other native plants to put in their yards. I had 10 neighbors who said, yeah, we'll take free plants. And I'm doing that again this year. Again, offering native plants just to get people's foot in the door. Four, don't spray herbicides and pesticides. Ironically, yesterday I got an email dumped in my box from the Centers for Disease Control. Startling data. More than 4 out of 5 U.S. children and adults over the age of 6 have detectable levels of glyphosate, that's Roundup, in their systems. 4 out of 5. I'm 84, and I would hate to have too much of that weed killer floating around in my body, but it's there. Yeah, it's there in probably all of us. What can you do? As city and as individuals, I encourage you to plant natives, of course, and you can join in the effort that Doug has going, where you can have part of your lot become what he calls a homegrown national park. And I've included a website that I'll leave you after I'm through. And what else might you do? Well, there are 3 ideas that came to my mind. One, Chicago has an organization called Chicago Living Corridors, and DeKalb might partner with them on that, as some other cities have, out this far from Chicago. Second, there's a national push to establish pollinator centers throughout the United States. Those are called Bee City USA and Bee Campus USA. So here's an opportunity for both the city and NIU to encourage the use of native plants. And finally, I urge you to take that important step of looking at the plan to see places where you can encourage the use of native plants. It was ironic that the previous slide talked about urban planting, and I thought, how appropriate for what I'm going to say. It's down now. Finally, and probably most important, plant natives in your own yard. Maybe 10%. So thank you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for letting me share. Thanks for what you're doing.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your comments.
Thank you. The 2005 plan talks about continuation of Taylor Street to Peace Road, trying to research what happened to that initiative through the website. I was unable to. But in general, if you could also speak to planning relative to alternative routes, as we have developed some major thoroughfares. We recently had an incident on Sycamore Road, and it was very challenging for people to find alternative routes. That happens often on Peace Road as well. So if you could just speak to the initiative to find alternative routes and also the specific instance of Taylor Street continuing.
Yeah, I don't know if Bill's familiar with the Taylor Street history, but the plan is not specifically a transportation plan. It has some comments in a little section about that. But Peace Road will be improved shortly from the interchange north to Fairview, and then further up to Route 38 in the future. So that improvements are planned along there to encourage future industrial development along there. I'll let Bill to speak to the Taylor Street.
So sometimes decisions made by private entities change things, sometimes public entities, sometimes a combination of the two. Taylor Street, if you were standing at 7th and Taylor, you would look east and you'd look at what used to be the old Del Monte complex. And for generations, there wasn't much else down there. In fact, some of the crop that went into the cans that got to the kitchens were right in the backyard there, but much of that came from other farms and so forth. But sometime in between my first coming and my second coming here, so I was city manager in the 90s, and I was again appointed in January of 2019. Park 88 happened. Park 88 is, as you see now, and we have a tendency over time to think, well, I guess it was always there, or it was meant to be, but it was none of those things. As I say, back in the early 2000s, that wasn't there. There was one building in Park 88. It wasn't called Park 88 then. It was just south of what used to be Spalding Plastics on South 7th Street on the Fairview extension. So what's happened is other development was permitted. Other development has grown. There's a huge 1.5 million square foot Target warehouse down there now. The people who live between 7th and 11th Street, and now there's a mobile home park there and so forth, are not keen on having truck traffic on Taylor Street. That was another ingredient and probably led policymakers to allow for a Park 88 to happen. So Park 88 has grown, has developed. It's been a benefit to the city in terms of employment, certainly, and tax base. And some major corporations are centered there now. So that happens. Now, that begs the point about Peace Road. Is that an adequate arterial to carry the traffic that's on it today? And the answer is no. The upgrading of that road from a 2 to a 4 lane is an expensive proposition. The first phase of that is a multi-jurisdictional project. The county, the city of DeKalb, state of Illinois. The city's share was, well, let me tell you the scope of it. It's not the whole thing. What we'd like to do is widen it to 4 lanes from the bridge that goes over the UP tracks, so all the way south to the interchange. And that'll take probably at least 3 phases. The first phase is to get from the interchange to a point north of Fairview where the 4 lane eventually tapers to a 2 lane for lack of money. And when you get past Maycomb, you're back to 2 lane. And someday there'll be money, so it's $10 million to get from the interchange to that tapered point. And the state of Illinois has a lot of money in that. The city has money in it. The county has money in it. And there's money also from the developer of Park 88. Millions here, millions there. It adds up to 10 million. And it's probably another 10 million to get north to 38. And then I don't have a guess what it would be to get to the bridge on the north side of 38 as you go up over the UP tracks. But that is essential. You know, we've got 4 lanes now in Peace Road coming down to that north point, and it becomes a choke point. In terms of accidents, unfortunately, one of the worst intersections in the county is right there at 38 and Peace, partly because of the way that intersection is configured. You don't have a true T. You've got to kind of crank your neck, and when people are in a hurry, they don't look hard enough or as many times as they should. So that has to be redesigned too. So anyway, there's a lot more to that answer than we have time for today, but Peace Road needs to be upgraded. The project, at least in terms of the utilities, is to start yet this year. And next year, when the work downtown DeKalb will be done, you'll look forward to work on Peace Road. But it'll be the start, and you'll see it. It's a major undertaking.
And just one more thing on Taylor, that August property of former Del Monte is not in the city, but if it would ever annex or incorporate or redevelop, there could be potential road connection to Simons or Industrial Drive, which could relieve some of that truck traffic that does tend to go through Taylor Street neighborhood, which nobody wants to see over there, but just to point that out.
I guess in general, those kind of contingency plans, that could be discussed in the document. So many. But at some point, the document addresses a $7 million blitzkrieg is necessary to catch up on some of the road repairs. Are there plans for that type of funding, and is that followed through somewhere?
Bill's the finance guy, yeah.
Yeah. The plan is underway now, $2.5 million this year, and $2.5 million in the next couple of years. We have 2 years ago, we added to the money that could be available for road construction by adding a little bit onto your motor fuel tax, the local motor fuel tax. Nobody wants us to do that again right now. So we pulled together, I presented a financial plan to the council in March and April, which is one of many offshoots to this comp plan. It supports, everything isn't always referenced, but it certainly fills in pieces that otherwise wouldn't be in a comp plan. And it projects that kind of need, and pulling together over the next, it was this year, next year, and 24, our fiscal years on a calendar year basis, how we can get to that amount. So that's how we're going to do it. Without increasing the motor fuel tax, which council doesn't want to do, without increasing the home rule tax. There's some money next year if we can get things moving on the legal end in terms of the sale of cannabis products in this town. The estimate is, just to be conservative, somewhere around $200,000 maybe per dispensary, maybe a little bit more than that. Initially, it might be a lot more than that. And we're in line, we feel, for one, maybe two. As you may know, in our area, and this is, now we're going down a sidebar here, but in terms of money to do things that isn't part of the normal tax system, we are in a region of 7 counties, it's 8 counties, that is only going to be, in this first round, given 3 licenses, and that's, we're not going to get through all 3, so we might get 2, we might get 1. We've got 1 lined up pretty much now. So.
Hi. The changes that are happening in the climate are due to fossil fuel use. So I'm wondering if the building department the new laws, new plans are taking that into account, that we really need to think ahead so that buildings aren't as dependent on fossil fuels, but can use alternatives, solar and wind, thermal. There's a lot that can be done, but it really should be part of the plans and the plan of a development aspect like this.
Thank you. Yeah, I know there's a sustainability plan in the city. This plan, the comp plan, is more general, and it can reference a plan like that, but it's not, we got, in terms of dictating certain types of construction in the city, we got the basic updated international building codes, and we got to be careful when we look at requiring codes are going to cost developments too much money, or they won't come to the city. So we certainly take those, considerations. In fact, we have all the updated codes adopted, and they're looked at to make sure we're current. And we do recognize other plans perhaps that may be adopted at the city that relate to a specific, part of the plan. But thanks for your comments on that, and we'll certainly take that in consideration.
I walked in a little bit late because the website indicated this meeting was going to start at 4:30, and it started at 4. I saw some other members of the public walk in. So if you've already addressed this issue, please let me know. And I'm assuming this whole thing's being recorded so I can watch the presentation that was presented already. I'm trying to remember what year it was. When he was on the school board, Cohen Barnes was president at the time. He said that if we build the new high school, 1,500 new homes will be built. And looking at the plan here, and I don't know if you touched upon Iron Gate and I missed it, can you tell me what the status of Iron Gate is? Because it showed a 0 when I was reading through the background material here. What is the status of Iron Gate and these new homes? I think it's like 15, I don't know if it was 1,500 or more plats or whatever are already out there. What is the status of that?
Well, Iron Gate was annexed in and zoned and a preliminary plan approved, but it's been up for sale for some time. So, I think the original developer's not interested in doing anything. So it's been for sale. I don't know the status beyond that. Nobody's come forward to the city in terms of, yes, I want to do part of this development. It was 1,300 total lots in the city that are, in all the developments, subdivisions that are vacant or ready to be built upon. Now, Iron Gate was a preliminary plan approval, not final plat, but they were preliminary approved lots. So, but about 1,300 total lots in the city that are unoccupied or zoned for a single family.
And that still could go forward if another developer?
If somebody came forward, yes, the zoning and the agreement stays with the land.
Well, following up on that same developer who was kind of holding us hostage on 3 sides, I did note that in the Central Business District, he's now posted that property for sale. I don't know how that's designated in the comp plan. And then his other development was on the eastern edge, I guess what's now purple. There was talk of a high-end hotel and conference centers. Are we open for business as far as developer ideas there south of the airport? There were...
You talking about the parcel at Peace Road and Route 38?
Correct.
The Shoding has, it's southeast.
And I believe
corner.
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's still zoned for commercial, and the southern part was multifamily zoning, so
Correct.
that zoning is intact.
So the deal, I guess, that was made was if he followed through and developed the northern portion as the hotel/business park, then he would be allowed to do the single family south of that. So I don't know if that's
Yeah, the comp plan
memorialized
reflects what was approved in that agreement. Commercial, northern half, multifamily, and southern half of that development.
I don't know if we're answering the question. So when you look at, let's get back to the comp plan. So this is the map that's proposed at this point that reflects the language in in their text that some of you had a chance to look at. And, boy, you see a whole lot of purple, and that's basically on the east side of Peace, but also includes some areas.
I can probably bring
It's
the area he was
Feel
talking about.
like the weatherman, right?
Yeah. Here's what he was talking
Yeah,
about.
here's what, so, this may turn out, I'm not gonna be a prophet here, it may turn out very much that the ultimate development of that may turn out like the ultimate development where Ferrara is. And you may remember that that was annexed and zoned in 2006, and there was going to be housing there, there was going to be commercial there, and a node of industrial. I don't, as we know, that was rezoned, and it makes some sense now. Certainly, we've seen what's happened. We were open to some change, and we've seen some tremendous industrial development south of the tollway in between South 4th Street or 23 and Peace. So we feel now, what we're saying here with this purple coloring is it's very likely, in view of the market interest that we're seeing now, that what's east of Peace from the tollway interchange up to 38 will probably be of interest to people looking to do larger light industrial, maybe office research, that type of development. And somebody else will be here in 5 years, and you can call them an idiot. But that's our best guess because it's based on some real interest. We are talking to people who are inquiring. They're not saying, hey, let's get down to brass tacks and talk about how I want to invest here, but they're making inquiries. And some of them are making inquiries with us after they've done their own homework and their due diligence, and some of them talk to the businesses that have come here and get a story. I think it's mostly positive about how they've been treated. So.
Yeah, and as Bill mentioned, the Chicago West, where Ferrara is, part of that when it was annexed in 2005, I think they had retail along 23 in anticipation of further residential to the south. Obviously, that didn't happen, so they've come in now with all, industrial type uses, and they'll probably, and we show that in the area that is zoned for retail, that we have industrial type uses there. So there's a change that happened, and the plan reflects that. But that particular Shodine property, we just reflected the zoning on here, but that doesn't mean that as industrial grows here, some industrial developer bought that or got it under contract and wanted to do some type of non-residential or non-retail use, we would certainly be open to that. That's the trend of development along Peace Road, so.
So the plan has flexibility.
Yes, yeah.
Following up on Mark's sentiment, what exactly are the plans to support housing starts, which essentially has been flat not only in the Iron Gate area but elsewhere? Does that appear in the financial plan as far as how the city may support those types of initiatives, or?
There's a little discussion in the financial plan of residential, but in terms of the comp plan, we do encourage a combination of things, housing starts in terms of, we're keeping our permit fees intact in terms of impact fees. We've kind of waived those along with the other districts. Working with other taxing districts, make sure the property taxes are, intact in terms of, so we're not discouraging residential development and people want to come live here. Working with the school district too. And, more of a business-friendly environment in terms of permits. And the financial plan did have some section on the housing, which Bill can probably address. But it kind of comes from many different angles in terms of trying to encourage housing. I think we have to encourage a kind of mix of housing, but we do have a lot of vacant lots in some of these subdivisions. And many are not in, subdivisions that have a lot of affordable housing in. So that may take a little bit of time, but we're encouraging other residential development too. Anything to add on the
impact fees, or you're bringing them back?
Well, right now, and through the end of this year, and this has been going on with the city for, I think, about 5 years now. The city impact fees have have been waived. The school district, we talked to them in 2019, and on an annual basis, their board takes action to consider this, and through the end of this year, pending further action by their board, they have frozen, or they have waived their fee. Sanitary district has done the same. So, and our building permit fees have not changed since I've been here. I think we adjusted one just because we're doing a lot of solar. Somebody's asking about solar. We're doing a lot of, people are adding solar units to their houses. It's something that was never anticipated 3-4 years ago, and so had to add that into the fee system. It requires some inspection. But it's not, it doesn't seem to be the cost of regulation that is keeping people from wanting to build a new house. So it's other things, and that's another discussion, but we had some discussion on this point when the financial plan was discussed and ultimately implemented by the council. And one of the key things, and something I've believed in for a long time, is you have to have a variety of housing to meet people at different stages in life and different levels of income. Right now, the economics of new house construction are skewed terribly by what's happening in the world. The cost of 2x4s and 2x10s and trusses and metal parts and windows and doors and roofing and all that has been out of sight. Although talking to some of the builders that we talk to all the time, there's been some leveling in certain of those components, but that may change tomorrow or the next day, having to do with supply. But the point is that we know on the basis of our census data from 2020 what the average annual household income is, and most of the houses that you could build that are being built today are beyond what that average household can afford. So lots of discussion is needed around that. I proposed, the council took it under advisement for further discussion later on, some different types of layouts that would involve smaller lots. There's been a lot of that discussion around the country and around the world in the last 20-25 years. Unfortunately, some of it has led to living on top of your neighbor as if you were in an apartment. I don't think that's necessarily the case or what has to happen. So we propose some other things. And smaller houses. A lot of people in our community, we have a big hole. I'll stop in 2 seconds. We have a big hole. If you look at our population from 18 years old up to, say, 65 and on, and I'm on, you see kind of an inverted bell curve. For obvious reasons, we're a college town. You see a pretty big bump from 18 to, say, 30. And you see a pretty big bump from about late 50s on up. But you see that proverbial trough in the middle. And why is that important to us? Because that's the family rearing age. That's when people settle down, find career jobs, hopefully, raise children, schools get involved, obviously, and all of that. So we're losing out there. And so housing is important, and it's important that I'm glad that it was brought up tonight. But what the comp plan can do on that is encourage, as it does, some more creative thinking about how those houses, to meet those certain income levels, should maybe be laid out. That's the land use part.
Bill, didn't Jodine pass away, and his kids have a little different outlook?
Kent is still around. Yes, unless he died here in the last couple of weeks. I think his children have come certainly into more control and
I just have a comment. I'm a retired professor, and I think our students are very, very precious, and wish them well, and especially their health. And I am not in favor of making marijuana or anything that has an adverse effect on people's health and more available to the students. I think we can make money some other way. I think we can be adults and not exploit the students in that way when it's adversarial to their health.
So continuing on that idea of housing support, at one time there was a first-time home owners program. I believe that was discontinued. Does that remain discontinued?
We don't
have it at this point.
program now. No.
So I mean, I throw that idea out there. I'm involved with 3 universities, and this is the one that seems to lack incubation of new businesses. Doesn't even have to be a business, organizations, nonprofits arena. If you want to keep the students, we do a great job getting them here. Well, we did at one point. So the idea of fostering students to continue on in their young professional life with incubation support programs, I highly encourage you looking at that. But speaking of the university, and I certainly do respect DeKalb as a university town, but the reality is that in 2005, we were trending up, and shortly thereafter hit 25,000 as an enrollment at Northern. And since then, we've experienced a 35% decline, and trending seems to support that. So are there Plan Bs in action? What else can DeKalb be, or how do we fill in? It's well and good to put banners in the CBD, which perhaps will extend awareness. The last time I talked to somebody who had done some research, the perception of DeKalb by the student population was that downtown was where the McDonald's Junction corridor was. So there's no doubt that we would do well to market downtown to the student population. But is there a Plan B, I guess, and might that be articulated in some manner in such a document, in such an initiative?
Yeah, the plan does, as we talked about before, mention working with NIU in terms of attracting students to downtown and support of the AGN area. The plan won't go into details of the university and how they can change the enrollment figures. But the plan does address those issues in broad strokes, and doesn't not the intent to go into details on those. The plan, as mentioned, is more broad, but it does encourage, obviously, working with NIU and for the students in downtown and the AGN area in support of that. So, but we certainly can look at some additional language if that would help. So.
Can I speak? Thank you.
Yep.
I don't need that. I got a loud enough voice. The previous map that I have, he mentioned the Taylor Street extension. The previous one in 2005 showed from NIU on the west side, from about the Convo Center. It was before the Convo Center was built. Mm-hmm. They were showing around the DeKalb. So it went to the north. You can go up Nelson and hit Bethany and get around town. And it showed something to the south coming to Gurler and making Gurler connect with Peace. Well, we now see that Gurler and Peace has come to 23. I'm wondering if there's nothing on this map that shows that at all. But why wouldn't that make a more sensible extension to come to the west side? Because I know the people on Fairview Street are so upset with the trucks. I live on Gurler, mm-hmm. and the trucks are just going to be a part of the rest of my life living on Gurler, so I might as well accept that. I just thought that, I'm just curious why they didn't think about a coming around corridor.
Yeah, the 2000 plan had that access on the west side going down to Gurler. And that, well, it wasn't constructed because there was no development that happened that would pay for that road connection. So it'd just be too costly to put the road in without the developers building there and paying for the improvement.
You see when the Convo Center does have like the graduation ceremonies?
Mhm.
Have you seen some of the traffic on Annie
Yeah.
Clinton for that?
Yeah.
I mean, the Convo Center's at least built, it's there. I mean, it hasn't done what they hoped it would do, but that doesn't mean that it won't in the future attract whatever other. So it might be smart to plan for something to go around.
Mhm.
I think their hopeful plan that the trucks will not go through downtown is pretty much hopeful. I don't think it's really going to happen, but we'll see.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
If you live on the south side of town, and I noticed one of the items on the sheet here indicate economic development, the south side of town is kind of like, I kind of think of it like when I used to travel to Europe, we had to go through East Germany to get to Berlin. So there's this barren land you couldn't wait to get through until you got to your location. And the south side of town, 4th Street corridor, I'll tell you, it's very embarrassing. It's an entryway to our city. I live on the south side. South side only has one restaurant, one sit-down restaurant, and it's only open for lunch and breakfast. And that's just one of the signs. Pretty much everything is gone. And here we have that whole area in purple with the industrial development. We have Facebook, Ferrara. These folks are going to work, and then they have to go all the way either to Sycamore Road if they want to grab a bite to eat. How does this plan address the South 4th Street corridor? You touched upon it briefly. Like I said, I got here at 4:30 at the scheduled start time on the website, so I missed if you talked about this already. How does it address South 4th Street?
We do mention in there that South 4th Street, in terms of the land use, we do call for commercial development along there, even in some areas that currently have homes, to encourage more commercial development. We actually have a hearing coming up Monday for a new restaurant at the old KFC at 922 South 4th Street. Be a sandwich shop coming there. So that's very encouraging. So the plan also talks about South 4th Street as something maybe to take a look at in terms of a corridor study or an overlay district. A corridor study will look at that area a little more detailed. And so that was, South 4th Street was focused on as an area to study further at the next step. So to look at the plan to encourage more commercial development along there, particularly with, as you said, Mark, all the industrial development on the I-88 corridor. So we see that as an area that's ripe for improvement, and it's very encouraging to see this restaurant wanting to, from a local restaurant owner, to develop along South 4th Street. So we definitely want to encourage more commercial development along there. So a corridor like South 4th Street or even East Lincoln Highway is focused on too. So there may be more analysis or studies on South 4th Street in the future.
I have been curious about the effect of the way the COVID business was handled in Illinois on our business people here and also in the state of Illinois. It seems to me it was absolutely disastrous. And I really, my heart aches for these people who have put their heart and soul into their business and then went out of business. But as a former professor, I do respect statistics, and I don't have any statistics on it, but I've seen the closed businesses. So if you have any information on that, I would be interested in it.
Yeah, the plan doesn't, cover that. Obviously, a lot of restaurants were hurt, so I think the plan, just addresses, business friendly. They had a hard time, so we want to encourage businesses and other restaurants to come forward, trying to make our process approval, easy and, fast, meeting all the requirements still. And we encourage, a restaurant to go to business. If another one came in there, we'd work with them, like this one on South 4th Street, to make it, we weren't saying, stay away, it's not going to work. Let's work with you. Let's make the site work. We're encouraging you to come in. So that's about what we can do, really.
I've been listening to all these questions and comments on that. And Mr. Nicholas, you spoke to lifelong learning and told about the past, but what was in the future for DeKalb. And we really appreciated that. I'm sitting here and listening to all of the technical questions and answers, but I've noticed that Northwestern is one of the leading hospitals. We have a new service for children over by Panera. It hasn't opened yet, but it's going to be there. So do you have subcommittees that are working to promote DeKalb as far as not a small town, but a growing town that would encourage some of the people that are in the suburbs to move out here because we have the roads that they can commute, or they can go in and their jobs to the city or any of the suburbs, and still have a family-oriented community that is supporting the families, where a lot of the suburbs are lacking in the services that we have out here. So I'm just wondering if there are subcommittees within your planning.
It's a good question. Well, how do we get our story out there, right? Right. And presumably our story is good enough to attract people to come to town. So there's this thing, I don't know if it'll last, but it's called the internet. It gets to a lot of homes. We have Mr. Scott Zach there, so ably staffing the microphone, who was hired a year ago to one of his important things to do when he's not distracted by FOIAs and things like that is to encourage people to take another look at us, and he does that on a full-time basis. And so I think it's not because people don't know where we are or who we are or what we do. Part of it is what people meet when they get here, right? Visually, so if we don't have people who can take people in a visitor center, say, and say, tours are starting at 2 o'clock and we're going to take you around. Don't have the staff for that. Don't have the resources for that. We're still a small city. But the word is out, and because we have a Facebook page, we have other ways of getting it. We have pretty good media coverage, too, of what happens here. And the word about the buildings and the businesses that are here is definitely out. So Paul Borick just left. He had to leave, but there's a private not-for-profit called the DeKalb County Economic Development Corporation, and it's been expanding its reach in terms. Thank you for that. In terms of its way of marketing the whole county, including the city. The city of DeKalb is only one of 14 municipalities in the county. So, and the county itself has a story to tell. So there are a lot of people who work on this every day. It's just not obvious. They're not sitting here, and it's mostly because this discussion isn't about that, but it's logical you bring that up, so I appreciate that. So we can't stop trying to put our best foot forward. That's absolutely true. You don't get a second, it's true, you don't get a second chance at a first impression. So one nice thing is with all this mess downtown, those guys who are in, it's all guys right now who are working in those iridescent vests downtown are really affable and friendly. And they, in the heat and so forth, I suppose they'd be a little irascible, but generally they're not. I see them helping people. And so those little things make a difference. And I think generally that's how we are in this town. And that's why I'm proud to be a resident here.
A quick anecdote about the workers downtown. I was trying to cross the street, by
I told them to look for you.
and push me forward, right? And this worker came up and said, well, actually, I was with a friend too, and said, "Here, let me help you." And he kind of walked out and scouted if there was a truck coming or something. I mean, he was just really nice. I mean, he went out of his way. It was close to lunchtime. We were probably interrupting his half-hour break or something, and he was just, really gracious to two little old ladies trying to grab their lunch.
And here's another nice thing, the people doing that, this has nothing to do with the complaint either, brought it up. They're a local company. They got to look at it. And, almost all of their employees live in the county, and many of them live in DeKalb, so it's, they take pride in it too. They're very proud of the work they're doing. You can see in the concrete they're pouring and other things.
In Bill's comments, he referenced Scott and being distracted by FOIAs. I just want to point out that Illinois state statute expressly allows people to request freedom of information. So the phrase distraction I thought was rather disheartening here. But on the subject of that brings me to an issue regarding downtown enhancement here. Yesterday, a couple days ago, Carolyn Morris had a alderman from the first ward had a very informative ward meeting. It was attended by a lot of folks who had a lot of good questions, great discussion. And one of the discussion points was the free internet service which is offered in various parts of our community, including in the first ward. And I know that Joanne, who is here, was in attendance at that meeting as well. And the question, or she brought up the fact that downtown we did have some sort of free internet downtown. I would assume that's part of the enhancement program here. But that program seems to have been discontinued, and I know that there was a big investment in that program. I had asked about a follow-up to Joanne regarding that. She told me to file a FOIA to get that information. I thought perhaps we could answer that question without distracting Scott again here. So maybe we can get an answer, since that is part of downtown enhancement, that was part of the enhancements for downtown. What happened to the downtown free internet that we had put in place?
Well, I don't have the answer for you tonight, so I don't know that situation, but your FOIA will answer that, certainly.
Well, you shouldn't have to file a FOIA. It's just simple. Every email I send, I'm told to file a FOIA when other people get the same information simply by picking up the phone and calling. So,
I can tell you, as I sit here, I'm not aware of at least since I've been here, we haven't had a free internet program, a new program like physically to install, to bring Wi-Fi to businesses for free. It's not happened. Not since I've been here, a new program to do it. Now, maybe it happened, and maybe it's no longer in place.
We paid a small amount for the hardware. There was another company that was coming in that was going to utilize the marketing aspect.
Yeah.
And then
But in terms of, there's been no new infrastructure that has happened since January of 2019.
there was prior to it. So
Maybe, I don't know.
disappeared.
So
It might have been a free installation, I don't know. That might have been part of the original ribs that were put in town, I don't know.
there was a vendor when Mark Thorson was here that came in and offered to do some stuff. But if it did get disbanded, it would be nice to have that information one way or the other.
I know this now because if Mark was the origin of that,
Correct.
then I was here, in fact, I laid him off, but within 6 months, it's part of a cost-saving thing, having nothing to do with performance. But that was something that was talked about as a possibility. It was not anything that I brought to the council.
No, it was executed in at least
Not,
At least-
not on my
Correct.
watch.
Before your arrival, it was executed, they were performing and getting some data from Cornfest and other visitor activities.
Anyway,
And then-
but maybe we can get back to the comp plan. 'cause
Okay.
this-
So
yeah.
two housekeeping issues, and then I have something substantive. Number one, on the face of the document, I know this is the language that was used in the 2005 plan, but since then, the identification has changed from alderwoman, alderman to council member, so perhaps that could be addressed on page 1. Another little picky point is on page 43, there's discussion of the $1.25 million project for the sidewalk widening. I believe the numbers are quite a bit higher, if I'm not mistaken.
What page is that?
That's on page 43, under objectives. I believe it's much closer to 2 million when all is said and done. So you might want to look at that. But before I hand the mic off to other people, one of the substantive questions is, are there any initiatives within involving shared solar? So there are initiatives elsewhere to put in a bank that might serve a whole neighborhood, and I'm wondering if that's incorporated somewhere in the document or just
No, it's not.
No.
No, not that detailed to it. Yeah.
You know, just so everybody knows, and we've been saying this through the evening, but it's important to note that this is not an operational document. It doesn't say there's this much money assigned to this. This is a land use, and a comprehensive land use plan. That's what it is. And these are good questions to bring to a council meeting. You know, you heard from the floor. Have you done this? Have you done that? See me, but you're not going to find it in here. It's just not a piece of what that is in the city's quiver of many plans, many operational objectives and initiatives. And Bill, that reference is reasonably correct. Right now, it's closer to 1.5, but when this was written as a draft, it was 1.25. That's not for the whole town, that's for the downtown. Yeah.
I was handed the microphone. I'm Nancy Prozel, Tapaluna, and I remember when there was talk about Wi-Fi, being available, but there were some businesses that decided to just provide that service to their clients, anybody that came in, and Tapa was one of those. But it unfortunately did not go across. It did attract some of the business owners, to provide that. That was just a point, and I was just handed the microphone. So.
As a former council member, I am pleased to see the term council member. It gets away from the distinctions and the controversy around alderman, alderwoman, the awkwardness of those terms, and it is totally appropriate.
As a former council member, I guess awkwardness is in the eye of the beholder, but I don't want to get into language. I did want to ask about comparison. I wanted to make sure, I did not see the existing comp plan up on the boards.
It's on,
And-
we don't have there, it's on the screen.
So you had that on the screen, or you just put it on the screen? I'm just saying.
No, it's on the slides, it's on the screen. Yeah, I had it up before. but-
All right, I brought it up
Yep.
before. My suggestion or request, and I apologize if I missed it, but I did not see it easily accessible about this proposal, or was it there as a click that I missed?
On our webpage about the
Yeah.
open house and comp plan, the plan is on the webpage. I don't think it was in that particular
Yeah,
open
but
house
my
page.
suggestion is, as this process goes forward, to put the link in there with the promotion of this event, a council meeting, plan commission meetings, hearings, whatever you have as this goes forward, is to have that link in there so that people can easily look at the two documents.
Yeah, we'll get that added, yep.
And, you know, that would be my suggestion. And is there a significant change in any land use in this document that you could call our attention to, either by
Yes.
zoning or change of land use in some significant way?
Yeah, there's a handout over there that goes over the primary changes in the plan. And for the most part, it involves the large reduction of the single-family area from the 2005 plan that had single-family all out in the mile-and-a-half area. That was scaled back quite a bit with this plan. So within the mile-and-a-half, the majority of the area is ag use, and only a small few areas proposed possibly to annex into the city. That was due to the large inventory of platted, preliminary, or final lots in the city. So there's plenty of capacity or inventory for single-family already in the city. So that was scaled back. That was probably the biggest difference. Also, the additional industrial in the southeast part of the city, particularly down south of I-88, south of Gerler Road in that area, pushing out east to the boundary agreement we have with Cortland and Sycamore, so expansion of industrial was a big change. Those are probably the biggest change, in the conversely, the large area of additional ag land within the mile-and-a-half. So that was probably the two biggest changes from the plan. But that summary you got over the table, that goes over the main ones. Yep.
Thanks, Scott. Another housekeeping item, page 42 of the document refers to the city of DeKalb under community appearance as a brawling industrial town. We may want to change that nomenclature. Just be advised of that. There was, and I'm trying to remember, it was maybe 5-10 years ago. I believe Anne Marie was the city manager at the time, and there was, I can't remember which plan it was, but we had sit-down sessions with members of the community where we had roundtable discussions to discuss, I don't think it was the comprehensive plan, but
It's the 2025 plan.
yeah, it's the 2025 plan. How come we're not doing something similar to that this go-around to allow discussions, more in-depth discussions? You know, there was topic areas where people would rate the most important things to them, and the city would get guidance as far as, is industrial development more important? Is your neighborhood development more important? Those sorts of things. Why did we not do this go-around with this particular?
Well, we approached it as a plan where we worked with the commission. We had 4 meetings with the Planning and Zoning Commission to come up with a plan so we could present something to the public to react to and provide comments. This is the second open house. This is the opportunity to provide feedback. We have a hearing coming up on August 15th in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission to provide feedback. So we've pretty much opened up quite a bit to public input and many factors. We have a site on the webpage, social media. So we approach it that way, of feedback from a plan that's kind of put in a draft form, so there can be a proper time to, ability to respond to it, to something. So there's plenty of public input available, as we can see tonight. So that was approached. We're taking more as we go in, and the hearing will be in front of the commission, and we'll take those comments. And if the commission feels there needs to be more public input or some difference, then we can do that. So.
It seemed very engaging, because we got good turnouts for that at the various sessions where people could talk with their neighbors and, bounce ideas. You get an idea from you, whatever, and it's like, let's talk about that. How can we make this better?
Mm-hmm.
Just seem more involved than the previous.
Yeah. Thanks. Any others? Well, thanks for coming, and if you want to stay around and ask any questions, Bill and I will be here. And again, the hearing will be set for the commission on, for August 15th.